Welcome to The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky, a weekly podcast that breaks down politics, policy, and current affairs. I'm Becky Scherr.
And I'm Michael Brodkorb.
We are back live again to recap last week's primary and get into all things DNC convention. Today, we are joined by Julius Hernandez. Julius is a self-proclaimed policy nerd who serves as the director of advocacy for the Institute of Digital Humanity. He has been heavily involved in DFL politics over the last few years, working on races from the Minneapolis City Council, state legislature, all the way up to Congress. He was also recently working on the Don Samuels campaign in effort to defeat Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Julius is also co-chair of the Ham Caucus and fully supports ham as the superior holiday meat versus turkey.
Come on.
We will kick things off by hitting on the not all too surprising primary election results, which included shenanigans in CD7, where Congresswoman Fishbach dominated, confusion in CD2, where Taylor Rahm was denied, Omar coming out on top, and Royce White being confirmed as the GOP candidate up against Amy Klobuchar. But the bulk of our show will be to preview and discuss the DNC convention that started yesterday in Chicago. We will break down the enthusiasm around the convention's first day, which included a speech from President Biden, and discuss the important roles of some of Minnesotans' own have at the convention. We will get into some of the notable Republicans attending and speaking, and we will hit on the anti-Israel protests and what impact it may have on the convention and the party. And we will end with what we can expect in the upcoming days of the convention. But before we get into it, I want to share some exciting news. The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky have been invited to join the 2024 MinPost Festival on September 28th. This is an exciting full-day event with speakers from Minnesota as well as some national voices. The Breakdown will be hosting a live podcast from the event and would like to invite you to join us. We will put the link to purchase tickets in the show notes and on our social channels. You can take advantage of a 30% discount by purchasing before September 3rd. We would love to see you in person. So thank you for joining us and enjoy the show.
A live show.
A live show.
We've really gone far. We got a live show coming up.
It's going to be great. We hope you join us. It's going to be a good conversation.
Well, I'll be there.
Oh, you will?
Yeah. I mean, are you asking me if I'm going to come?
I'm thinking about showing up.
Okay. All right. I'll be there.
Perfect. And we'll discuss more about what to expect, some guests, and what the topics of conversation will be. But first, we are going to start with a primary recap. Last week was Minnesota's primary election, and while there weren't too many surprises, we want to break down some of the results. So I want to start with the top of the ticket. We are stuck with Royce White. White got almost 39% of the vote to Frazier's 29% of the vote. Now, it's always a little sad when the person who wins a primary doesn't even surpass 40%, but initial takes on this. Julius, you've been watching this from afar. What are your thoughts on Royce White as the GOP candidate for Senate?
Yeah, it's super interesting because I have gotten to my fair share of Twitter fights with Royce White, which seems to be the norm these days in Minnesota.
Everybody has.
Yeah, it seems to be the norm these days. I mean, man, it's like figuring the GOP has a lot, the MN GOP has a lot of stuff to figure out, right? What this is going to be 19 statewide races in a row that you guys will lose, and it'll probably be the worst one on record for the GOP, I'd imagine. And it just doesn't make sense to me actually that someone is aggressively anti-Semitic and controversial and misogynistic is like the top of the ticket here in Minnesota. And even like looking beyond that, you know, for Donald Trump, who like thinks that he's competitive in this state, you know, generally these candidates are going to be the ones that kind of drag you over the finish line. It doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. So this is worst case scenario for them and GOP. And, you know, I hope that you guys figure it out soon, because two strong parties is good for democracy, but not when Royce White's the top of the ticket here. So,
Michael, we've talked a lot about the potential impact that a Royce White at the top of the ticket, aside from obviously Donald Trump, may have on down ballot. Were you surprised that he won by almost 10%?
I was disappointed. I was disappointed. I'll say that. Maybe not surprised, but disappointed. What I will say is the closeness of the race between White and Frazier showed that if some Republicans, and I'm going to not name them, but if some Republicans had stepped up and showed and offered some institutional support to Frazier, I think he could have got over the finish line. And I think that this is going to be for part of the post-election autopsy. There's going to be, I don't see any value. I don't see that Royce White is going to be value added to the Republican ticket in any way, shape, or form. I think he's going to be a distraction. I don't think he's going to be a team player. I think it's going to cost Republicans opportunities in potentially some legislative races. And it's really sad. It's really sad. And again, as Becky, as we've talked about before, this is really a time for Republicans like me to make some decisions about the party apparatus and what we want to get involved in. And I've committed myself to start getting more involved in the party process because Republicans, Republicans like me who, have a podcast and sit behind a keyboard can't just complain the whole time. I mean, Royce White was endorsed through the party process. There's not any evidence that there was any cheating, monkey shines, tomfoolery, or any of those types of games that was done. And it's just sad. It's sad for the party. And I think it's really unfortunate because, again, I'm not saying that Klobuchar has done anything that requires her to be voted out of office. But Becky, as you and I discussed, and Julius, I'd like to get your take on this. I'm a big believer in campaigns. They say a lot of times, they've said, someone smarter than me once said that legislatures are the laboratories of democracy. I also think that campaigns can be those types of opportunities. They can be those types of places where you can have discussions and good ideas can come out of them. And I just don't see how Royce White is going to be value added in any way to the Republican ticket. And I don't understand how this state will be better because Royce White was traveling the state talking about things. His rhetoric is bigoted, anti-Semitic, misogynistic. He is a schoolyard bully. Yeah. And he is masquerading himself as some intellect when he's nothing more than a bully. And it's unfortunate and it's sad. And Republicans have to start taking elections more seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, right? Like the Minnesota delegation, David Hahn should have bucked the endorsement and backed Frazier, right? Like I think Minnesota, we have such a, I'm from Chicago originally. We don't do endorsements there in Illinois, but like the endorsement process here is so important. But sometimes you have people, and I'll get into it. And, I worked for Don Samuels, but I'll get into it then as well. Like sometimes the people that you get the endorsement, like are not representative of the majority of people that will identify with that party, right? Like I know there are really good Republicans in the state of Minnesota that fundamentally disagree with who Royce White is, what he says. And like those people don't want to show up because they're so embarrassed or they're so frustrated by the direction of the party and that no one came out in support of Frazier. And listen, I have my problems with Republicans and the party and like, the MNGOP, but yeah, it's really tough to like have someone like Royce White at the top of your ticket, not only to say like, hey, we are turning the corner and getting rid of extremism, but like to energize Republicans in this state who have like a really bad losing record, right? And say like, hey, maybe we can like turn the corner. Amy Klobuchar is not going to lose. That's just the reality of it. But there's vulnerabilities other places, in my personal opinion, for the DFL that you guys can capitalize on. And having Royce White like as the figurehead is just going to be controversy after controversy in the national and local news versus like legitimate policy conversations. Like Michael was saying, like campaigns need to be serious policy conversations and referendums on what the country should look like. And Royce White isn't going to bring that. So,
Becky, when did Jason Lewis run for the U.S. Senate?
In 2020.
So there's a perfect example. Jason Lewis and I disagree a lot about politics, but Jason Lewis was value added to the ticket in the sense that he was running and he could be a part of the team. He would complement the message that Republicans had. He was, in essence, he could play well in the sandbox together. He could be part of a statewide tour. He could arguably be value added to and complement the entire Republican message. Even though I disagree with him on his politics and some of his policies, you can't make the case that Jason Lewis wasn't value added to the ticket. Right. And just that kind of ability to just kind of go, I don't see that with Royce White. And so the challenge that Republicans are going to have, and I don't want to belabor this point too much because we've talked about Royce White a lot, but the challenge is that Republicans have a thin landing strip. And the thin landing strip, they have a little thin balance beam they got to land on. And having Royce White a part of it it just creates difficulty in the environment for Republicans to succeed.
Well, and I think one thing that we're seeing, and probably we'll hear more about, is right now it's not about It's obviously about who we can bring over to vote for Republicans, but also making sure we're not turning people away. And that's something that I think Royce White does, and that's where we have potential to see the impact down ballot. And I think after we get through the election, we'll have more conversations about the endorsement, because we also, if we look at CD2 and CD7, I think there are two situations where some kind of, let's call them some shenanigans around the endorsement process played a role, and there were primaries in both of these seats. CD2, it was Tayrab versus Rahm. Rahm was the endorsed candidate who then supposedly dropped out of the race to work for Trump's campaign here in Minnesota, but did not make an official announcement, did not pull his website lit, and signs were still going up. I think we talked a little bit about it last week in our primary election preview, that there were some thoughts that Rahm may come out successful. And if that's so, then he would be the guy. That was very much not the case. Tayrab won 76% of the votes, with Rahm getting just 24%. Michael, we've talked a lot about this. Is 24% for Rahm lower than you anticipated?
What it shows to me is this. It shows to me that there was a coordinated effort for him to still campaign. And I think Rahm, what I will assign responsibility to Rahm for is not speaking out publicly. And so his lack of public statement disavowing it means to me that he was complicit in some way. And that's unfortunate. Because it created, I think, some confusion. It created a lot of legitimate questions about what was going on in the race. It was a waste of time. And this is why Republicans can't have nice things. And that's what's unfortunate. And again, I'm saying that as someone who, I mean, I have voted for Angie Craig in the past. So this isn't a situation where I'm just saying is like, and Becky, we've talked about this before, the entire apparatus of the Democratic National Committee pivoted around when Biden dropped out and coalesced around Kamala Harris. And in the 2nd congressional district, we can't get campaigns to get on the same page as to whether a candidate is running or not. That's the reason why. I mean, that's my frustration.
We'll obviously be talking more about CD2 moving forward. It is still a top battleground district in the country. It's, I think, still lean. I think it's lean Democrat right now, favoring Angie Craig. We've had the opportunity to speak to Joe Tayrab, and so we will chat more about that going forward. Just briefly mention Congresswoman Fishbach, CD7 did not endorse. It was a wild thing. She is a great congresswoman. She is a true conservative. She is a great fighter for that district and represents it so well, and dominated. She won by 30% over Steve Boyd. So this was a great win. Not that it's going to change anything. There's still going to be the Fishbach haters in CD7, but congratulations to Congresswoman Fishbach. She deserves another term, and I'm excited to hopefully chat with her again soon. But now I want to chat right before we get into the convention briefly about the rematch in CD5 between Congresswoman Omar and Don Samuels. We've had the opportunity to speak with Don Samuels twice on this podcast. Michael and I have been very impressed with his passion and his arguments to why he is running and wanting to truly serve. I mean, he is the epitome of what a public servant is. Now, do I agree with him on a lot of his policies? No, but he is what, when you look at somebody who is going to serve you, whether it's in city council or Congress, you want somebody accessible and transparent and available. And he clearly, that was his mission and his goal. Unfortunately, was not successful in the primary, but Julius, I want to give you a little opportunity to chat a little bit about your role on the campaign and what you guys did leading up to the primary election.
Yeah, I mean, first I have to say, like, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, Don is, like, in his private life, is when you see him, and in his public life, is someone that epitomizes what good leadership is, and someone who spends his time building bridges, not burning them, someone who tries to put out fires, not ignite them. And I have never met someone, you know, I spent a lot of, you know, I worked in politics for a long time. I spent a lot of time around, you know, local elected officials, and I've gotten to meet a lot of national, like, elected officials, and this guy is just the real deal. And it's so unfortunate that, you know, we didn't pull it out. But I will say this, we had a great team, right? Like, I want to shout out some people just because I didn't plan this, but Joe Radinovich, Sam Schulenberg, James Abelson, Emma Holden, like Nico Woods. I mean, these are people that gave up a lot to campaign for a guy who is really great against someone who has caused a lot of pain in our community, especially in CD5, right? Like, we have a very large Jewish population here. And when you have a congresswoman that goes around and says, Jewish students are pro genocide or anti-genocide, and makes the world all black and white on issues that have been as complicated as ever now and in the last 70 years, it's unfortunate. But I will say this, like, a lot of us were not expecting that result. I don't think Ilhan was either, unfortunately. And you could see it in the way that she was campaigning. But it's really hard to win a race when someone lies about where you're getting your money from, or this boogeyman of AIPAC. We didn't get a single dollar from them, right? Saying that we're being funded by Republicans. Listen, I would have got paid a lot more if we had more money, right? Like, wow. And also, like, the other part of it is when you're getting outspent 20-1 in ads, and 95% of her money was coming from outside of the district. Like, that's a beast to compete with, and to be frank, she should have won by more. All the traditional political odds would tell you that someone who raised $6 million to our 1.8, I think we finished with, would say that she should have beat us by 60, 70 points in a primary, but she didn't. And I think that goes to show that there's still an appetite for really different leadership. But it's hard to compete with when you're getting outspent 20-1 and you're raising, 95% of $6 million from outside the state of Minnesota. So,
Julius, I'd like to get your take on the comments she made on election night after the primary. She made some pretty harsh comments. How usually when someone wins, they are a bit gracious. There's a bit conciliatory, meaning there's an attempt to kind of bring the team together.
Yeah.
Describe from your perspective what she said on election night.
Yeah. So I think her, I don't want to say verbatim, but I want to say close to her words were that she described Don as a candidate who was willing to align himself with literal neo-Nazis. Is almost identical to the term that she, to the words that she used. And I mean, how ridiculous, how absolutely stupid as a sitting congresswoman that you would say 51,000 people who voted against you are literal neo-Nazis. That is absurd. That's ridiculous to say that 51,000 people in one of the bluest districts in the country are literal neo-Nazis. I mean, come on, please. I won't get on my soapbox about it, but I mean, that's like any other congressperson in the country would say something like that. They would be, hammered for their comments. It would be in the national press, but no one says anything about it, right? And I think this also speaks to a bigger issue that we have here in CD5, but I think in general for a lot of more viewed as more progressive candidates, is they're insulated by a very small but vocal group that doesn't allow that gives them double standards, right? Anyone else says anything about that to their opponents, supporters, they would be chastised. But she doesn't get any kickback from it, right? Like, I'm not a neo-Nazi. I'm black and Hispanic. I think I'm the furthest thing from it, right? So it's just shameful. It's gross. And it goes to show to her leadership, right? That she is not someone who brings people together, and she's not a good leader, right? Like, she didn't win with grace. She won with anger and division, and that's how she's going to keep leading. So, I
believe the quote was Nazis, not neo-Nazis. I think she literally said, yeah. I think she said literal Nazis.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, not that it's a huge difference between neo-Nazi and Nazi, but I mean, she just, and you don't usually see that on election night when someone's won.
Yeah.
Becky, I don't know in your experience, winning or losing on election night, are you one to if you've
you don't dance in the end zone, right? I mean, I've written some concession speeches in my day.
Dancing, but
I mean, a little bit, but usually it's I want to thank him for, the conversation and bringing these out and having, bringing important topics, back to this. I hope we can work together and, it's just, it's wild. Especially in a primary, right?
Oh, yeah.
This wasn't a Democrat versus Republican. Yeah. This was Democrat, and it's wild. And
one other thing I do want to say, it goes to show the divide in the Democratic Party. Like, the GOP has their issues, obviously, right? But so do we. And the divide is like this really extreme left version of the party, and the people that are just like, we just want to get stuff done. We're sick of the aggression. We're sick of the nastiness. And that goes to show, like, our primary system is difficult. And it brings out the worst, I think, in parties and people sometimes. So.
Well, I think maybe, Julius, after we maybe need to have you back on to talk about that, because I think we'll get into a little bit of some of the division in the party when we chat about the DNC convention, but that's something that we talk about a lot. The kind of common sense Republicans versus far right, and certainly is an issue among the left too. So, well,
common sense like me and far right like you.
Exactly.
Well, Becky has a better food take, so probably common sense.
Oh, we'll get into that. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Well, 76 days until the election. It's soon. It's really soon. It's coming up fast, and so we'll watch all of these races go. Some obviously CD5, not typically a super competitive one. CD2 likely to be one of the more competitive ones. So we'll have future conversations. But now, want to get into the big news of the week. DNC convention kicked off yesterday. Before we get into who the DNC convention is really about, the Harrison Walz ticket, I want to chat a little bit and give some attention to the other Minnesota players that are at the convention and highlighted this week. Lieutenant Governor Flanagan was named as one of the 4 DNC convention chairs. The others are Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, former New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu, Representative Veronica Escobar. And so big news. Anybody? I guess I don't even know who were the RNC chairs, so not necessarily a big thing that people pay attention to, but great for Lieutenant Governor Flanagan, especially as Walz is moving up. She has a potential to be the governor. Any thoughts on that from you two?
Julius, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool, right? Like, it's cool. I think one of the really exciting things about that, is that it's like kind of a diverse like version of who the Democratic Party is, and it just kind of highlights like who we're trying to lift up in leadership, right? Like a what is it called? Native American woman, a Black man from New Jersey. Like, a lot of these people show who the Democratic Party is and like where we're trying to head in the next years, like as our leadership kind of continues to get younger and more diverse. But I think it's cool. I think it's cool that was like a big thing, and Peggy got to go up there and introduce a lot of speakers and get her national profile up as she like probably ends up becoming our governor, right? I know it's a close race, but I'd like to think that we're going to pull it out. So yeah, it's really cool. I mean, it's also like, I'm not a native Minnesotan, so it's kind of cool to like have like the pride of Minnesota.
Where are you from?
I'm from Chicago originally. I was born.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's like really exciting to like get that Minnesotan like view of and be like, oh, we're on the world stage or national stage, and people are paying attention to kind of all the great things we have to offer. So it's really fun. Yeah.
Becky, what of the convention did you watch, and your thoughts on the opening night? Can't hear you, Becky.
Wow, rookie mistake. My dishwasher was singing its song that it was done, so I tried to mute to mask that. I'm so sorry. I watched Lieutenant Governor Flanagan's welcome last night. I do think, we talked about this a little bit with the RNC convention and their goal. Obviously, the Republicans are working to do this to change the narrative, but the Republicans tried to show diversity, and that's certainly, like your point, Julius, was absolutely. They said the co-chairs were selected to show the breadth and diversity of the Democratic bench at all levels of government, and I do think that's great. So I watched her introductory speech. I did watch Biden's speech, which we'll get into, and that's other than a few clips here and there, that's about what I watched last night. It's not really my scene. I'm gonna watch. I read a lot about it, but that's about it.
Go ahead, Noel. Go ahead, Becky.
I just wanted to add, DFL Chairman Ken Martin is the Vice Chair of the Democratic National Convention. Ken Martin and Amy Klobuchar will both be speaking at some point. And last note of real quick of Minnesota, highlighting Minnesota, after the Walz pick, Minnesota delegation was moved front and center next to California, obviously Harris's home state, next to Delaware, Biden's home state, and obviously Pennsylvania, which is one of the key delegations, the key states, battleground states. So Martin has teased some big surrogates coming to the Minnesota DFL breakfast. They have all these sort of events, so it'll be exciting to see who comes from that. But overall, it seems the first night, I mean, very energetic, right? It was a little rowdy.
It was one point of note. Minnesota was in the front row at the Republican National Convention when it was here in Minnesota. I didn't have a front row seat, I had a second row seat. So it was fun to be at the convention, but it's great to see Minnesota near the front. I will say to you that I was texting both Republicans and Democrats during the speech, during the night's performance, and the Democrats that I texted with, some of which were at the convention, were blown away. And the Republicans that I texted with were a little frustrated, a little concerned. Now, in the interest of disclosure, I don't really travel in a pro-Trump crowd, but they are Republicans. But they're they're not necessarily the red meat Republicans. So take that with a grain of salt. I will say to you that what I thought was so remarkable about the convention, just as someone who has endorsed Harrison Walz, so I'm watching a convention that I'm excited about. Here's what I found that was interesting. And Becky, I wonder, like, to get your take on this first. They had an all-star lineup of Democrats through the years, and they're going to have it all through the convention. And I was watching that, and when I saw Secretary Clinton go up, and I was, going through, and my kids were watching, and I was watching it with them, and they were talking like, why is she going ahead of Biden, and what is this all about? And I said, look, at the Republican convention, there were no former presidents, there were no former vice presidents, there were no former, there were not that type of institutional support. I think one of the things I think Republicans need to be mindful of is how united the Democratic Party is. And so I understand that I've heard some people go out there and say, well, having Secretary Clinton go out there and speak doesn't really do anything to help Kamala, the vice president, win, doesn't help Governor Walz win. I would argue this is that what it shows is that the tent is together, and that they needed that. And that's what part of this convention is. Yes, these conventions have have a communication point for the voters. These are prime time, in essence, paid political advertisements for the parties. But in this particular instance, one of the things I also think is that this party needs to heal. It needs to come together, and it needs to leave united. And so having the luminaries that they're having, the former electeds, the former standard bearers of the party, is really powerful. And I think that the Democrats are on track right now to leave incredibly unified and incredibly united. Can they keep that up for the next 3 days? We'll see. But boy, oh boy, they blew the roof off the United Center last night, and you could get that sense through the television.
Before we get into discussing Biden's speech, I don't disagree. We saw Hillary Clinton, Governor Bashir, AOC, Jill Biden, Julius. Any key points from any of the speakers aside from Biden, or your overall take on night one?
Yeah, I mean, I think Michael hit it on the head, right? Like it's I saw a lot of the same, right? Like people are like, why is Hillary Clinton speaking at the DNC convention, almost 10 years later? It's like the point you made, right? There were 66 million people that voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. And like, she was the first major Democratic nominee that was a woman, or even from both parties. And so it's like, there's a lot of respect there for the shoulders that the party going forward, the DNC going forward, is standing on, right? Like, we have a lot of respect for the people who paved the way. And especially for us, as Kamala Harris as our nominee, like having Hillary Clinton there means a lot, because it's like, this is the woman that we're building off of, who really like left, she likes to say 66 million shatters in that glass ceiling, or cracks in that glass ceiling. But I mean, I think, and I know we'll talk about this later too. There was a couple times I even got a little emotional. I'm not an emotional guy, but like there was a couple of speeches where I was like, this is like America, right? This is what makes us great, is like we have such a diverse bench of people that believe in the values that our party brings. Like Hillary Clinton, like it was kind of emotional seeing her up there and being like, that could have been our first woman president. And like she was, I have my opinions about how that race went, but Having people like, some of these lieutenant governors and county officials come and say, like, we don't have to be U.S. senators to make a difference, right? Having a lot of these working class. I mean, I think actually one of the most pivotal moments of the night was having 5 union presidents come on stage and like really make a strong case for like, this is the union party. These are the people that are going to make our country better, make our country pro-union. And then again, I know we'll talk about this later, but like having these people come and share their stories about abortion and kind of how that affected their lives personally. I mean, I think the messaging overall is like, this is a people driven party, and it's not like an elite driven party. And that's what I really loved about it. I mean, AOC,
very fiery speech.
Yeah. I mean, I think like, sorry, and I don't mean to rant, but to go back to what you were saying, Michael, like having AOC, someone who came in as an activist, she's a DSA member, like come in and have the entire arena chant her name, right? Goes to show that like the party is unified. We might not agree on the policy stuff, but we are behind our people 100%. And people like AOC, who are the future of the party, are getting the love they deserve, and we are showing it, through our unification that first time. It was great. I loved it. I thought it was great.
I saw a Washington Post article that said it seemed to be the moment that AOC completed her journey from left-wing squad member and a thorn in the side of her party's leaders in the past to being a bona fide Democratic establishment star. I mean, that is one I saw. It was all over my Twitter of the love and applause and support she was getting, which is different than what we've seen in the past. She has been very much the thorn in the side. We saw Cori Bush lose her primary. We've seen Omar having some issues with her primary, obviously. And so I think that is something that is very different, and will be interesting to see where she comes, if she stays that way, and what we'll see from her.
Yeah. And one thing I want to head on too, there was this big argument on Twitter, because I'm chronically online, about like if AOC has abandoned the progressive like leftist movement, and like it's so insane to me that people would be offended that this legitimate, like this person who came in as an activist is becoming a legitimate influencer and lawmaker on Capitol Hill. Like, why would you not want someone who if you're farther left, why would you not want someone like AOC legitimizing your movement by her becoming a legitimate policymaker and balancing the line of still being like an activist in her own way, right? Like, you need to get stuff done. That's the point of being a progressive, right? But it was so odd to me just to see people upset, especially on the far left, that she was up there, being a establishment shill or whatever words you want to call it. So
I was very curious how Chuck Schumer, Senator Schumer, watching a House member. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see her, if in the United States Senate at some point, because that was a very fiery speech.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think she will be there sooner than later, for sure.
And, while I know there's all of the rigmarole of like getting speeches approved or at least, sent into the conventions and all of that, I mean, they certainly took a chance. They had AOC the same day as Hillary Clinton, and I have to applaud that, because that does show the diversity within the Democratic Party, and something, unfortunately, we don't necessarily see on the Republican side. So, but big one of night one was President Joe Biden's speech, which did not start until after 10:30 Central Time, way past my bedtime. I was in bed. I watched it today. 90 minutes behind schedule. Convention officials blamed the energetic crowd for delaying the schedule, and they actually even pulled a handful of speakers from the lineup to get him out there.
I was bummed.
You were bummed?
I was bummed.
I was, man, you took my joke. I was going to ask if we're going to be seeing you this week. But speaking of you, your Twitter feed last night read very much like a Biden fan club. So talk to us. Can you explain a little bit? Was it about Biden? Because you haven't been a fan of Joe Biden like you are of Tim Walz. Was it about Biden, or was it because Biden did the right thing by stepping down and his speech reflected that?
A lot of emotions last night. First of all, let me say this. I understand the Republicans want to, and I really like Scott Jennings on CNN. I think he's fantastic. He's a commentator on CNN, and he does a lot of discussions and a lot of commentary. And he was talking a bit about how, this is kind of like more of like a funeral, and Biden is, giving a eulogy at his own funeral. I got to applaud the Democrats for pulling this off. because, as Nikki Haley said, the first party that replaces, I think she may have said the first party that replaces the 80-year-old at the top of the ticket is going to win. Look at the enthusiasm that's happening right now. I mean, it is amazing to me how quickly President Biden has been forgotten about. And so it was interesting to see that play out. I mean, his speech was delivered late at night.
Yeah.
I haven't analyzed his State of the Union address, but it appears to be an offshoot of his State of the Union address with a few more punchy lines in it. And so he gave it, it's over with, and it's done. The party process worked. And I wish Republicans could do that, because they want to talk about, democracy and this is a coup and all this type of ridiculous stuff. The bottom line is the party process worked. The party process is sometimes ugly. It's frustrating, and it can sometimes be brutal and unfair, but so is life. And so I thought it was good. It was also, I think he got the send off that he needed and he deserved. I disagree with Joe Biden on politics. I disagree with Joe Biden on policy. I do not disagree or question Joe Biden's love for this country and his and how much he supports and defends the institutions of this country. And I have no question about that. And so to see someone to get that type of send off is what he deserved. And I'm glad to see him get it. But it is surprising to me how quickly he has receded into the past. And I will also say, in the most respectful way possible, when he went up on stage and he spoke, I'm like, they absolutely made the right decision. Mm-hmm. Because what you've seen, and this is to piggyback a little bit on what Julius said before, the Democrats have a deep bench. I mean, the Democrats right now are like the dream, like the Olympic basketball team in 1992. They have a ridiculous bench. And and that's one of the things that's happened over the last few weeks, in the last month since he's gotten out, is you've seen all of these various rock stars that are in the back of the bench of the Democrats. Really not, though, because they're United States senators or members of Congress, they're governors, but they're overshadowed by obviously the president. And to see them step up and effortlessly coordinate this, it's simply remarkable. And as someone who used to be much more of a party boss, boy, it's respectful. It's interesting to watch. You got to imagine that. But again, let me say this. I disagree with Joe Biden on a lot of things. I do not disagree upon his love and reverence for this country. And he deserved that send-off last night. He got it. And I think the Democrats handled it really well.
He came out to 4 minutes of applause, which is wild. Thank you, Joe chants. There were thank you, Joe signs, aviators. I mean, they certainly did a lot to make him feel the love, right? And I expected his speech to maybe sound a little more bitter, to have a little bit more tinge of some a little bit disgruntled. And I didn't get that. I think that he sounded fine with the decision. I think he had some great lines. He talked about America, I gave my best to you for 50 years. Like many of you, I've given my heart and soul to this nation. I've been blessed a million times in return with the support of the American people. Julius, I don't know where you stood on the whole Biden thing before he dropped out and after. But what was your take on his speech? It was it seemed to be the passing of the baton and very energetic. Now is Kamala's turn.
Yeah. I think as the resident DFLer here, I will give. So before Biden dropped out, when Dean Phillips started running for president, I did say like publicly, like, I think Biden needs to drop out. I didn't support Dean because I thought he was the best candidate. I think he's a really great guy, but I think that like, you could see it in the writing on the wall really early on that Biden was going to have a serious problem, like getting the Democratic coalition to stay together as unified and as strong as it is now. And it's not his fault, right? Like part of it is, but I think here's what I will say about the speech. I think, like Michael said, and that Scott Jennings said, it was kind of like a eulogy and like a goodbye to America. Like, hey, this is it. I'm done. And I actually am kind of upset about it, because I think the DNC did a lot of disrespect towards him in the process. Like it took so long that he was out of prime time by the time he started speaking. And I think that just like goes to show that was, to me, that's a little disrespectful, right? Like this guy gave he did a phenomenal job in his 4 years as president. And he's a good guy. He's a good man. Like, he should have been in that primetime slot. If you have to move people around, like, or just take a bunch of other people out, do it. Right. So that, to me, that was the issue. But here's what I will say. And Michael, I agree with you that, like, we made the right choice. I was like a very early person being like, we need to move on from him. Not because I don't like him. I love Joe Biden, but we needed someone else. And I'll tell you why. It's that he has a messaging problem, and it's not him, it's his team. And I thought throughout the speech, it was really good. And again, it was a playoff of it. It definitely was a playoff of his State of Union with some digs in there. But the problem with Joe Biden is, I think that speech, even yesterday, he kept trying to convince people who don't feel like the country is a lot better that it is better. Right. And that's what I think the problem with Joe Biden is that he can't inspire the way that Kamala Harris can because of who she is. But also his messaging is just, his team that's around him is lacking. Like, he kept talking about how the economy is so great. Objectively, the numbers say that they are, but people don't feel that way. And you can't tell people who don't feel that way that that is the case. And he said, well, what else was he? Like, you can't tell, or crime, right? He talked about crime in his speech, and he said, crime is down the lowest it's ever been in 50 years. I live in North Minneapolis. It does not feel that way. And you can't tell people that and expect them to just get on board. You need to keep inspiring them and giving them a vision of, like, hey, here's where we are. We are doing exponentially better. Here's how we're going to grow off of that. And so I think, you know what? I think Joe Biden went out with a bang. He had some times there where I was like, oof, this is a little rough. He slurred a little bit. It's hard to understand. But I think that, like you said, no one questions his loyalty to this country. And he gave impeccable 4 years if you're a Democrat for policy. I mean, he did so much in his 4 years, and you can't help but just say, like, that, thank you for doing that for us, because it was in its own right impactful and exponential. So
I don't disagree. I think that I had some issues with those exact things that you mentioned. When you're explaining, you're losing. And so it's easy to say those things. But like you said, when people are not feeling them, when we're seeing, a shooting in Minnesota where 4 kids under 13 were just shot in Minneapolis. I mean, it's just tough when we go to the store and buy our eggs and milk and all of this. And Joe Biden's certainly not. So it is tough to see that. But overall, I do think that it was a decent speech.
Yeah.
I thought he shouted the whole time. I thought that was a little tough. He didn't have any huge stumbles until about 30 minutes in. So I do think he sounded stronger than I expected, especially with the late time, which I'm with you. I think it was just a little disrespectful, both the late time out of prime time, but also because of the struggles that he has been very apparent about how he doesn't do much after 8 p.m. And this was 11:30 Eastern time. I mean, it's pretty wild. A couple of things that I did want to, I notes I jotted down as I was listening, because I am a nerd and take notes when I do that. One line that I thought was really great. He said, "I stand before you to report democracy has prevailed, democracy has delivered, and now democracy must be preserved." Knocked it out of the park on that one. I thought it was really, really great of saying, this is what we've done and this is what's coming forward. And because it was very, that is very clearly what the campaign is trying to make a point of. And I thought that was great. He made an old joke about how he knew more foreign leaders' names because he's old. I thought that was fun, cute. He called Trump a loser, which we talked about is kind of his zinger in the debate that we expected of. So, it's got to get that in there. And one last thing. One thing that we'll get into a little bit more later, I struggled with the Charlottesville stuff and going into all of that and hammering Trump on the both sides, but then saying, making his comments of the people outside have a good point. We'll chat about all of that at the end of the show, but I struggled with that. Overall, though, I do think he delivered well. I think he sounded stronger than I expected him to come out sounding. And he effectively passed the baton and will recede into the wings and I guess just be president for the next, couple months and sayonara.
I would say one of the things that resonated with me was the constant themes of democracy. As someone who has last week endorsed Harrison Walz one of the threads that I think connects the Democrat and the Republican Party right now, and this is not a left versus right issue, it's an up versus down, as a lot of people have talked about, is believing in the rule of law, believing in democracy, believing in the Constitution.
Yeah.
And I want to applaud the Democrats for embracing and using that rhetoric, using that phraseology, I think is important. I will also say the chants of USA were authentic, real, and I think were delightful. And as someone who is still wearing his Olympic cap, for two reasons. Number one, I'm a big Olympic fan, but two, the bright lights when I'm doing the podcast. It felt really good. It felt authentic and it felt real. And I think that particularly for Republicans like myself who are supporting this ticket, the connective tissue is on democracy, it's on the rule of law, and it's on the Constitution. And to see the Democrats so willingly, openly embrace that and accept it, I think is important. Let's remember, this is still a Democratic National Convention. And what I mean by that is making Republicans making Republicans, independents, and others feel included is part of the job, but it's not the primary objective. This is about rallying the base.
Yeah.
And so them spending any time inserting that type of language and giving up some precious real estate, I think is a significant overture, and it shouldn't be missed.
Yeah.
Agreed. One last thing I want to talk about from night one is there was a focus on abortion rights. We've talked a lot about how this is going to be an issue that wins, brings some people to the ballot box. That is their decision maker when they are going to that. They had 3 women sharing very emotional stories about abortion and the post Roe v. Wade world that we are in. One was a rape survivor whose stepfather impregnated her when she was 12. Another waited 3 days for an abortion for a non-viable pregnancy, and another was turned away from emergency room despite miscarriaging. This is what, as somebody who is a Republican and pro-choice, these are the stories that I think are really impactful, because it's not about a 30-year-old woman who went out and had a wild one-night stand and just chose that it was, gonna ruin her life if she had a baby. It wasn't, because of mistakes or wild nights out or just because of whatever it might be. There are real life, which is obviously a side of it, but these are the stories that I think when we're talking about the safe, legal, and rare ways of abortion, that why abortion should be allowed is because of this, because of a 12-year-old who is forced to carry a child to term that her stepfather raped her. I mean, it is just mind-boggling, and it makes me, I'm literally shaking just thinking of the trauma that these women went through and the pain that they had to go through to try to save their lives and move on from horrible traumas. And I think it was really compelling, and I think it was really important, and I appreciate their way of looking at this and focusing on the things that are not normally focused on when we talk about abortion. Any insight from either of you that you'd like to share?
Julius, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so you said you're a nerd earlier and you wrote down notes. I could show you here. I have a whole notebook of things that I was writing down. But one of the specifically on the abortion part, the girl's name that was raped by her stepdad, Hadley Duvall. So for me, it's one thing I jotted down is Republicans have an abortion issue. They are getting slammed in red states when it comes to referendums on abortion, and it is not going well for them. And women are exponentially turning away from them. Even women that would probably be traditional Republican voters, suburban women. Trump already has a woman problem, and this exasperated messaging on abortion is going to hurt him a lot. And there's not a lot of places he can make up that gap he's going to have in gender, or at least from what it looks like now. Right. So Hadley Duvall, raped by her stepdad, had I coach, I'm also a volleyball coach. I coach club volleyball. That girl is close to the age of girls that I coach. If one of my kids came into the gym and I would rip someone's head off, right? Like those are the kind, like you said, those are the kind of stories that like make normal everyday Americans think like that could be my kid, that could be my niece, that could be like someone else's like daughter, you know? And then the other thing I really want to hit on with the reproductive rights that I thought the DNC did so well when they were programming this is the husband and wife that were talking about the medical issues that almost cost her life. And the husband's name, Josh, I don't want to butcher it, Josh Zurowski. He quote said, "The fight for reproductive rights isn't just a woman's fight." And I think that that was so powerful and so good because it emphasizes that reproductive rights isn't like, hey, we hate babies and we just want to, like you said, just get rid of them, right? It's this idea that they're like, if you really care about freedom, you care that you can do what you want to do when you want to do it, and it's no one else's business, especially the government's. But the way that the husband said this isn't just a woman's fight, I think really is going to inspire a lot of maybe down the road men who are like, you know, kind of iffy to be like, you know, maybe I don't agree with this, but you know, if this was my daughter, if this was my wife, like, you know, I would want them to do what makes sense for them. And so I thought that was really good, like bringing a lot of men into the fight. Because I think this is sometimes a conversation that like a lot of activists say, you know, men can't speak about this because you guys don't have uteruses. But it's like, don't you want people advocating for your choice? And so I thought it was so good. I mean, that was the part that made me really emotional was Hadley, the young girl, and the husband, because it made me think like, man, this is what America is like, and we need like more people to step up and fight, you know, whether for freedom, whether you are a Democrat or a Republican. And one thing I really quickly want to go back onto is that Michael was talking about is this like the chance of USA and this idea that there's kind of been a monopoly on patriotism by the right to, or like by the GOP to be like, we are the country of, or we're the party of patriots. But like, I think you can see in the DNC's messaging yesterday and through the next couple of days that like they're really, really attempting to take back that idea that we are also patriots, and it just looks a little different the way we define it. So I thought that was really good, and I think you see that through that abortion thing and those abortion messaging issues and some of the other stuff that they were doing last night. You know, so I thought it was great. Yeah.
I will say to you, having attended a few conventions and having watched them, Ms. Duvall's statement was probably the most powerful moment at a political convention, aside from one of the candidates accepting the nomination, that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
When she went on the stage and quoted Donald Trump talking about the states passing abortions as a beautiful thing. And then she said, "What is so beautiful about a child having to carry her parents' child?"
Oh.
I stopped in my tracks. I was watching with my family, and the oxygen just left the room. It was such a powerful moment, and it is. And Becky, I leaned on some of our conversations, and it was, I think, a very important way in which to frame and bracket this issue. Because as I think a number of Republicans would like to think that the issue of abortion is in some of the ways as what you described, but there are real life circumstances, and having the bravery that it took for Ms. Duvall to go up on stage and say that is something. I don't know how she mustered the courage to do it, but I will say to you, aside from one of the candidates accepting a speech, it is hands down the most powerful moment that I've ever seen at a political convention.
Yeah.
And people are going to be talking about it for years, if not decades, that moment. And I think that it is further indication of how Republicans have an issue on messaging on abortion. And I don't know how you message against that. Yeah. I honestly don't. And Becky, this is a subject that we've talked about, and I have some ideas we can talk about off air about further discussions on it. But I immediately thought about our discussions, and it was just like, wow. I mean, holy moly. And I want to just say again, I don't know how she mustered the courage to do it. My thoughts, my prayers, and the strength that she had to tell that story is simply remarkable. And it is without a doubt one of the most powerful moments I've ever seen at a political convention.
Agreed. Absolutely. Thank you for letting us give a little time to that, because I do think it's important. I think it will be something we continue to talk about. And like I said, I do think it's something that's going to be a decision maker for a lot of voters out there, a lot of, in particular, women voters and suburban women voters, which are going to be crucial up and down the ticket for both sides. So we're going to chat a little bit just in general about this week is obviously about Harris and Walz. There seems to be a lot of excitement there. Any just general thoughts of this convention, Harris Walz, what we can anticipate? We have Governor Walz speaking on Wednesday, the Vice President speaking on Thursday. You guys excited for these speeches?
I'm very excited. Julius, take it away. You're the guest.
Yeah, thanks. No, I mean, I am super excited. I mean, I love the Tim Walz pick. First, I have to say, like, when Joe Biden announced he was going to drop out, I was at our campaign office. I said, "I promise you, Joe. I promise you, Tim Walz will be the VP pick." But I think here's what I will say. I think that the Democrats we have to, as a party, the next 3 days, make sure that the focus is on the vision of the future and not Donald Trump. I will say I had a little bit of a issue with how many times they talk about Trump and how evil and awful, and they're doing this Project 2025 thing. Leave it alone. This is about what the Democratic Party can do for the future and for the people of this country, and let's stick to that, right? So, I think Tim Walz is going to do a great job of that. I think he's such a dad. He's such a Midwestern dad. I love it, and I think that'll be super exciting. And I think Kamala Harris's speech is going to be ridiculously well put together, and it's going to be super inspiring. And I think it's going to be a great convention. And I think if they stay on theme and really hammer some of the messaging of the middle class and for the people, that'll be great. That'll be really inspiring, I think, for a lot of people who are on the fence.
I think it'll be what I'm looking forward to this weekend, and a couple things. It's interesting take on the negativity on the Trump. I'm going to defer to the Democrats on whether the balance that needs to be struck. I think we need to remember this is a little bit of a truncated convention. This is a shorter process. I did have some people ask me. I did have a couple Republicans say, "Boy, they're being awful negative. Boy, they're being awful negative." And I don't know. I don't know what's the gauges on that. I mean, I think it's, I don't know how to gauge that. But I will say to you, I think the question is can they keep the enthusiasm going? And I think that's the only challenge that they have right now. One of the things is I do think the feel of the convention, it has a much, I want to be fair. I thought that the Republican convention, and I tweeted this out, that I thought that Trump's kind of, my summation of the Republican convention was Republicans were unified. They were unified in under the umbrella in which they do. And Becky, please push back at me if you think I'm not being accurate in what I'm describing here. But again, they were unified around. I mean, we had Republicans on that were very excited about J.D. Vance. You and I had some reservations about his pick, but they were unified about Trump. My general sense is that they accomplished the message of unifying Republicans around Trump and the enthusiasm that was there. I think that, as I described, I thought Trump's speech was a bit long, and I think he gave the Democrats a gift by, if he would have gone 30 minutes on stage, talked about what happened, and then left, I think the race would be in a much different place right now. I think by him going out and politicizing his speech, and let's remember, it was coming on the heels of him nearly being assassinated. And so there was a lot of deference and I think grace given to him to message. But when he went out there and kind of went back to kind of the normal kind of stump speech, it normalized the race. And that was, I think, the big gift to the Democrats. And so I do think, and my message, my tweet of the kind of the final night of the Republican convention was, Trump's speech was a little long. Republicans are united. Democrats are in chaos. And I would say that the advantage was to the Republicans at that point. I think that's, the script has been totally changed. And I think you could feel the energy at the United Center. You could feel the enthusiasm that was there. And the question is, can they sustain it? And I think that they can, but that'll be the message in which to see what they can do. But I'm incredibly excited to watch Governor Walz's speech and Vice President Harris' speech. The one thing I will say that I thought was really kind of fun, if you're kind of some candids on social media, Governor Walz's children were there. They were kind of giving him rabbit ears. There was a lot. It had a very jovial atmosphere to it. It was interesting to see former Speaker Nancy Pelosi on the floor chanting "Go Joe Go" with everyone else in the convention. They've had a little bit of a frosty relationship since he decided not to run for re-election, and so ultimately it was just it's going to be really to see, can they keep that energy sustained? And there's no reason why I don't think they can.
I would like to start by playing devil's advocate that I believe it's called bunny ears and not rabbit ears. Just want to get
Rabbit
that out
ears?
there.
It's rabbit ears.
It's bunny ears. We'll put a
Oh,
poll out or something on
please.
Twitter. Man, oh
It's
man.
Rabbit, it's bunny ears.
I think we'll absolutely need, next week to chat about the bounce post-election, or I'm sorry, post-convention and what happens. We saw, the Sunday after the RNC convention, Biden dropped out and took all the wind out of the sails from the Republican side. I have to imagine if I was on Team Trump, they've got something up their sleeve probably to try to do the same.
Is he going to drop out?
No, I don't mean that. I mean some attack or plan or vision. I also think that there's some expectations of what we're going to see from Harris after this, right? I mean, we're 30 days in. We haven't had a press conference, a sit down interview. We need to see a lot more for her. We're just a couple weeks away from the next presidential debate between Harris and Trump, which is going to be wild. There's a lot of expectations of what needs to happen to continue this enthusiasm. I think we'll see a lot of that. The polls are looking great, but time will tell of what comes. And certainly we're going to have to analyze Harris's speech and how long she goes. Biden went some 45, 50 minutes. And so I would expect Harris's to also be longer than the 30 minutes you would have liked to see from Trump. But we will chat more about that when we get more of that. Want to hit on some of the notable Republicans attending. You broke the news that you are not one of the notable Republicans attending or speaking at the convention. But we do have Representative Barbara Comstock, who is from Virginia. She was on CNN this week, and she said, quote, after Donald Trump refused to acknowledge that he lost in his threats against democracy, it's important to turn the page. That is why I'm voting for the vice president. Former Representative Adam Kinzinger from Illinois is going to be speaking later this week. He has been longstanding critic of Trump, voted to impeach him due to the insurrection. Anna Navarro, co-host of The View, strategist, big on social media. She is also going to be speaking there. So I think it is something we sometimes see a little bit of this, but I think in this situation, there's certainly a concerted effort of Republicans who are jumping over Republicans for Harris, obviously, on Twitter, Michael Brodkorb's op-ed. There is an effort here of Republicans who are supporting the Harris Walz ticket and being vocal, and that is certainly of note here. Julius, do you think this is a good angle for the DNC to take in highlighting these Republicans coming over to their side?
Julius?
Oh,
You're muted, bud.
Can you guys hear me now?
There we go.
Yeah.
Sorry, gosh, I made a rookie mistake too. Jeez. Yeah, I think it's a super great idea. I mean, there's a lot of people who voted for Nikki Haley, probably, who voted for some other Republicans that can't stomach voting for Trump, right? Like, obviously, Michael, I think you said you've never voted for Trump, but you're still a Republican in theory, right? Like, you're still a Republican in the way that you view the world and how you see policy. Correct. And I think that the biggest thing that they should do with the Republicans is not come and say, like, hey, this is why it's good to be a Republican and vote because of policy, but make the moral argument for why Trump isn't, one, not really a conservative, but also like why Trump is bad for America and why he's bad for the overall health of the conservatives and the liberal, like a healthy two-party system is what we need. And I think Republicans saying, hey, we're willing to buck our party because this is what's going to save democracy. Get up there and have them make the moral case for Republicans. Say, listen, vote for her now and vote against her in 4 years when we have a better candidate. But Yeah, I think that it's a really good idea. I think there's a lot of Republicans that are going to be out there that can't stomach Trump, that are going to see other Republicans saying, "Hey, like this is bigger than us. This is bigger than our party," and I think that's really going to be fundamentally like part of building Kamala's coalition in this really tight race, especially in Pennsylvania and some of those places. Yeah.
I will just say, because we've talked about this a bit before, but I will just say I'm incredibly impressed by the fact that they're dedicating some of their prime real estate to letting some Republicans come in, and exactly as Julius described. It's not coming in and saying, this is why you all should be. The Republicans aren't using it as a recruiting opportunity. They're talking about why on some connective issues they're supporting. It's a great move by the Harrison Walz campaign. It shows confidence both in their ticket and their willingness to be inviting in. And I will just say, as someone who's been just briefly working with the campaign, I'm impressed by the respect that they're showing, and the reason that they're showing that Republicans, independents have value to this ticket. And I think it's going to reap long-term benefits for the Harris Walz campaign.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the unity within the Democratic Party. I want to chat a little bit about the division, because this is certainly something that we have seen a little bit of and potentially we'll see a little bit more of. Yesterday, we've got the anti-Israel, pro-Palestine sect of Democrats. Minnesota does have the most uncommitted delegates at the convention with 11. We have a quote that from Jeremiah Ellison, who is the son of Keith Ellison, who said, "We are delegates to the party. Everyone involved is a party actor. We hope to come out of Chicago secure in our feelings and ready to door knock for Kamala Harris, but we can't get to that place at the expense of the lives in Palestine." So we did see yesterday, there was anticipated to have some 40,000 protesters. It definitely fell short of that in Chicago yesterday so far. It's a long week, so we'll see what happens. There was a part yesterday where some of the protesters did pull down a part of the fence of the perimeter. There were some arrests that happened. It's certainly, I was listening to, not a regular listener, but did listen to part of the Ruthless podcast. And they said, when you show up at the RNC convention, there are Democrats protesting. And when you show up at the DNC convention, there are also Democrats protesting. So there certainly is some division here within the party that time will tell what happens, right? So some delegates have made demands that will absolutely not be met right before the end of the convention. And that is a private meeting with Kamala Harris, an arms embargo in Israel, a change of the Democratic platform, moving U.S. policy away from Israel. There are some folks that are potentially trying to have an embarrassing scene happen on the floor, grabbing the microphones, trying to get a ceasefire. Julius, as somebody part of the DFL, I know this is something we talked a little bit. Some of Don Samuels being called a Nazi and Omar's play in some of this. What's your take of the division within the party? Is this potentially going to be a bigger scene, or do you think it's more overblown and we won't see much of anything from them past the perimeter teardown that we saw yesterday?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard, right? I mean, it's hard because there's a lot of really good people in that movement that have some legitimate policy points that they want to see be met through the Harris campaign and their policy stances as it relates to Israel and Gaza. I think, though, that here, and going back to kind of what we were talking about earlier, here's the problem with that movement is that they don't care about legitimacy. In my eyes, they care about being agitators, and they think the only way to meet their demands is to be agitators and not to lean on their lawmakers. And so it's again, I want to be careful because I do personally support a ceasefire, right? Like, I think that it's too far. But what I also think is that these people are not viewing the bigger picture here of you can't call Kamala Harris Killer Kamala and then expect her to sit and listen to what you have to say about Israel and Palestine. And you can't call Joe Genocide Joe and think that this man's going to give you any time of the day. He's not obligated to. This is an issue that has been a problem for 70 years. And You can't just make it a black and white issue and then say, oh, this is exactly how you need to do it, especially for a lot of people in those groups that can't even tell you like a historical bullet point breakdown of how this functions, right? And I think the GOP has issues with their extremism. We have issues with ours. I don't think that the Palestine, like the push for peace in Palestine, is an extremism, but I think there are bad actors there who are just being agitators and not thinking about the long-term policy goals. And so like I don't think it'll be any more intense than it was yesterday. I think Chicago police and like all these police law enforcement things or agencies did a really good job of tamping it down. But I think it also speaks to like the arrogance of these people to think that they deserve time in front of the strongest people in the world because of the positions that they have. Like, you have to meet our demands, please. Like there are people sitting in a room right now working on a ceasefire deal, and you don't know half of it. And so, I think we'll weed out our extremists, but I want to be really careful, like because you call for a ceasefire doesn't make you an extremist, but when you make it like we need to eliminate the state of Israel, then you are an extremist and you deserve no space or oxygen in our party. We're not going to sacrifice progress at the expense of one group of people for another. We're going to make progress with both groups included. And so I think that's something that the DNC and the DF or the Democratic Party is doing well and is going to do well. And I think the GOP can take a couple of notes about handling their extremists.
Just a couple of quick points. I have long, and Becky, we've discussed this before, that I had in a couple earlier shows, I had raised some concerns about what would happen at the convention related to some of these protests, and also if changing of the ticket, would it open some platform issues? Would it open some more discussions? I also said that one of the advantages of this kind of chaotic convention and the change in the itinerary and the focus meant that we were not going to be screwing around right now, that there was not going to be that type of stuff, and that there was going to be more pressure because of the risk that the Democrats have by not being united in electing Donald Trump, that everyone would kind of stay, that some of that would be reined back. And so far that's happened. I've seen less of the protests than I had expected. I don't know why that is. What exactly, if there's been an organized effort inside the Democratic Party to curtail some of that stuff, but I have seen less of it. One little interesting story I would note. I was at the 2004 Republican National Convention in New York City, walking into Madison Square Garden, and I heard the police officers outside say that protesters were coming, and they made this announcement. They said, "Hats and bats, boys, hats and bats." And I walked up and I said, "What do you mean hats and bats?" He goes, "Well, helmets and batons." I'm like, oh boy, they're serious. So I think about these conventions, and there particularly having just read a book about the 1968 presidential election, there's a lot. I think that a lot of people had that 1968 convention coming back and all of that kind of turmoil. The Democrats so far, day one, have done really a good job of, I think, keeping everyone focused on where they need to be. I view this kind of like a family dinner, and it's mom and dad's anniversary, and we're not gonna bicker at mom and dad's 50th anniversary party now. And so that's what I think could be benefiting them. Becky, do you have any plans on going to the convention and protesting in any way?
No, absolutely not, especially not with this constituency. It will be interesting to see how it plays out. I expect there to still be some attention on it. There's obviously going to be protesters out it. Whether it gets to the level that was anticipated, I think is really the level of protest, I think, is really going to be telling, and if they are able to do anything on the floor.
Yeah, and if I could just one more time. I mean, so I don't know if you guys saw this, but there actually was Minnesota delegates that turned their back to Joe Biden while he was speaking, and were holding up, anti-war, genocide Joe buttons. But the other thing I think that I
missed that. It's like that's like a freshman prep. It's like a pep rally.
Yeah,
when the seniors put the newspapers up.
Yeah, and actually there was another point where there was some delegates that were holding up a sign that said, I can't remember what the sign said, but it was pretty war like sign, and there was delegates trying to rip it out their hands while Joe Biden was speaking, which was actually why they were delegates were chanting like "We love you, Joe" so loud, because they were trying to
That's
drown out
great.
their protest. But I think you make a really good point that like I really thought it was going to be so much more worse. And listen, I love Chicago. It's my hometown. And there are some very passionate people out there. So I really did think it was going to be a lot worse. But I think the other thing I want to hit on, the other thing that I think has helped this is she's actually giving them space, like to come and speak and listen. Like they had a session about Palestinian rights for the first time ever at any convention ever. And actually Keith Ellison was one of the speakers on there. Jeremiah is my council member, so I know him well. But like I think things like that, where you just give them space to speak about their grievances, and then say, hey, if we are giving you this opportunity to be in this room with us, don't disrespect us by me giving you space and then you slapping me in the face when I give you that space. So I think that's been super helpful to tamping that stuff down. And I really don't think it'll get any worse. I think other protesters who might be there to agitate probably saw that it was qualmed really quickly and are like, I don't think it's worth it. Right. So yeah.
My last note on it is I think it's I don't know if entertaining is the right word, but interesting that one of the main groups who is organizing these protests is an LGBTQ group, which, if you're familiar with anything in the Middle East, is certainly not an LGBTQ friendly zone. And had those individuals been over in Palestine, would most certainly be murdered. And it's just wild to me, but I did think it was an important thing to mention, because there is certainly, while a lot of unity within the convention hall, there is certainly some division within the Democratic Party as well. We'll see how that goes through the week and the rest of the convention. I agree with you guys. I don't know that it's necessarily going to have the impact that we thought it would be before, but we'll chat about it next week when we know more. So just want to kind of close with what we're expecting for the remainder of the week here. So night one, they always have a theme. We talked about that at the RNC convention as well. Night one's theme was for the people. Today, Tuesday, a bold vision for America's future. We're going to see Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff, former President Barack Obama, and former First Lady Michelle Obama, amongst many, many others. I'm just kind of sharing some of the notables. Tomorrow, Wednesday, is a fight for our freedoms, when Governor Tim Walz is going to be speaking. Former President Bill Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. There was some conflicting thoughts of Governor Josh Shapiro not getting one of the primetime spots that a lot of people expected him to get. Again, we chatted about this a little bit when we chatted about the short list. Folks can talk about why that may or may not be, but I believe what I read and saw was that Mayor Pete got the job, or got the slot that people thought Shapiro should get. So we'll see if that causes any ruckus around Wednesday. Thursday is for our future, and that's when we're going to be hearing from Vice President Kamala Harris. Also, when we'll be hearing from Adam Kinzinger, again, former Republican congressman, who, by the way, I met. I was in Congress working for Tom Emmer in Congress when he was out there, and I actually met him at the 2016 RNC convention and had a photo with him. So maybe I'll go back to the archives and pull that out. But I think that will be a really interesting speech. He's a really passionate individual, and I'm excited to hear from him for sure. I think, like you guys mentioned, I do think it will be along the lines of what you talked about. So Chair Ken Martin and Senator Amy Klobuchar will be speaking. We'll see more from Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, as she will be gaveling in and out of the conventions most days. Julius, who are you most, aside from Walz and Harris, who are you most excited to hear from this week?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. I actually really love Pete Buttigieg. I would have, if he hadn't dropped out in the primaries in 2020, I would have voted for him. I think he is just a phenomenal speaker. He's just such a great guy, and he's so good at drawing people in. I think he's a great speaker. I will say I love Michelle Obama too. I think that's probably going to be one of the bigger ones. She's so popular in the party. I think people are going to like go crazy when she comes out, but I think that'll be a really good one. But yeah, probably Mayor Pete is probably, or Secretary Pete now is probably the one that I'm definitely most excited for.
Michael, these are your people now. Who are you most excited to hear from?
Just twisting the knife every aspect. First of all, I'm really interested in what Walz is going to say. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
really excited about that, and I also I think it's interesting to see again, Becky. I'll go back to this. I think one of the things that's been missing from the Republican convention was all of these luminaries, all of these former electeds, I should say, all these former standard bearers for the party. I think that's something that missed out a bit, and I think that that's something that as Republicans we could say maybe that would have been nice, and that's I think it represents a little bit of the lack of unity in the party. I think they're doing a great job of laying out the vision and the nights. I really want to get like next week, Becky, your take on just going through the conventions because you have such a good comms PR mind about kind of laying what you think from an app, how you think they delivered their message and laid them out. I think it'd be a really good contrast, particularly get your perspective on that because you're so good at that kind of bracketing and messaging and how it would be done. The one thing I will say I'm interested in to see if there's going to be any surprise guests is, are we going to get a Taylor Swift appearance or something like that? Boy, oh boy. I mean,
Didn't you know Swifties are for Trump now?
I think that they're, I mean, I have to believe that there's something getting cooked up, right?
Luke Skywalker, is he going to show up?
Mark Hamill.
He's already there. He's already
Okay.
there. I don't know if anyone from Star Trek is going to be there, Becky.
Beyonce, maybe. They've been playing a lot of her music.
That would be huge. I mean, do you think that would be something? I mean, Republicans had Hulk Hogan.
They're going to have some celebrity, right?
Well,
Is Julia Louis-Dreyfus? I'm rewatching.
Oh, that would be awesome. That would be awesome.
There's got to be a couple celebrities that I think we'll see.
One thing speaking of celebrities, Steve Kerr knocked it out of the park yesterday. That is someone I would love to see in some sort of elected office when he's done coaching. That was really, I thought he did a phenomenal job. So speaking of celebrities, Steve Kerr was really he was a beast.
One last subject before I'm done is Becky, we spent a lot of time talking about Taylor Swift, particularly about the NFL season because of her support, because she's living my dream, which is what is my dream? Going to football games and watching them in boxes and traveling across the country. That's the only thing I'm frustrated with about Taylor Swift is that she's living my dream of as a football fan. Describe, Becky, if you can, this strategy for a second, and I'm not assigning this to you. We've talked about the juggernaut, which is the Swifties, and they are without a doubt, I think, the strongest movement and force in this world. Donald Trump is out there disseminating AI images, trying to convey that Taylor Swift is supporting him. Boy, that would not be something that I would do. I would not want to tick off a Taylor Swift. I would not want to tick off Taylor Swift or any of her legions of her fans.
Yeah, I agree. It's wild. She's still in London, she's got a lot going on. I don't know that we'll see her there. It would certainly be the most forward endorsement that she has done. She's dipped her toe in here and there. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility, but yeah. I think we'll see. If Trump keeps poking the bear, maybe that will be what it is.
I don't understand the logic in that. I don't know why you would pick a fight with Taylor Swift or her fan base.
They are aggressive. They will chew you up and spit you out. I'm scared of Swifties.
Just 1 second. What happens if it happens? I mean, what happens if she walks on stage or there's anything like that?
I don't know. I don't think. I think there's certainly some people that will be turned off. I think that some people are demanding it of her, just like they do of some celebrities. I think there's, very two different camps here, right? With all celebrities, that one, you have a platform, you should use that platform and speak up and speak out on policies and candidates. Others saying, stick to your day job. You're a singer, you're an actor, stick with that. I personally, while I don't agree with a lot of the celebrities, policy choices and what they support. If you have a platform, utilize your platform. You've worked hard for that. I think there is nothing wrong. Just like if a teacher or a doctor wants to share their political views, you're not immune from having views on policies because you are famous and because you have millions of people devoted to you and what you do. So I don't have an issue of that. It's certainly every individual celebrity has a brand, and you have to see if that aligns to and how it's going to impact your brand. At the end of the day, I don't think Taylor Swift has much of a brand issue. I think her folks are going to be there. I don't see Swifties who are paying these dollars to go to the Eras tour and who watch all of her Easter eggs and see, analyze every lyric and every emotion and everything that she does. I don't see them really falling by the wayside if she were to endorse Biden. But that is a very calculated thing. I think certainly, she is her and her team are one of the most smart businesses or corporations that we've ever seen, right? And so I think that they also have to probably see it is heading into football season. Is this going to be more of a distraction when she's now going to be sitting at the suites? Are the Chiefs now going to have to be is it being political in the football arena? I don't know that it's something that they want to walk into. But again, it wouldn't surprise me if we saw something from her. So
Before we close out, I want to give Julius an opportunity for you to go off on your food. You've had a lot of built up aggression, hostility towards me, which I think is undeserved because I'm inviting you into the. I'm along with Becky. We're inviting you into this space, but if you want to take advantage of that opportunity to be a guest here to unload it, what's your beef with my food takes?
I just think that they're bad. That's as simple as it goes. I mean, listen,
I see that I see Becky and Julius worked off script a little bit on this.
obviously.
Yeah, we did plot beforehand.
Be specific. Which food take is bad?
Oh, I mean, Michael, you dying on the hill of turkey is pretty aggressive. I mean, the worst holiday meat of all time. It's dry. You have to cook it for hours. It has no flavor. You could literally dip a turkey in grease and it would still taste bland and dry. Ham on the other hand.
Julius, that seems like user error.
No.
Error.
Listen,
Julius, I'm gonna have now. Guess what? You just earned? You just earned an invitation to my house to have turkey dinner. That's what you just earned. And I'm gonna
go to Becky's and we're gonna have ham. Don't worry.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, listen.
Any other food takes?
Yeah, I also have to say you did some of your fast food ones. I have respected. I don't love them, but I've respected them. Your candy bar. Actually, no, hold on. I want to be balanced here. Becky's candy bars were they were not great. They were just rough.
Your Take 5 bar?
Take 5? Oh my gosh. What is that? That's like you give those out at nursing homes. Like what are we doing here? Take 5s? That's crazy.
Excuse me, Charleston shoes are like 80 years old. Those are
great.
No, what? I mean, what? Listen. Maybe it's just because I have a refined palate. I mean, I really.
Wow.
No. I respect that you come out and you just say what you think, and even if it's that turkey is great, which it's not.
Of course it is.
But it's like I think really. Let me ask you this: Taco Bell or Taco John's? That's really the deciding factor here for me.
Well, a couple of things. My kids go to Taco Bell more, but I would go to Taco John's if I could more than Taco Bell.
And we are crossing the aisle and working together. Taco John's is quite literally the best food, the best fast food on the planet.
Biggest mistake Taco Bell ever did was getting rid of their border fries.
Yeah,
they stuck on those potato lays, man.
My son agrees with you,
Listen,
Becky. Yes.
I need some more food takes on the podcast. I need more.
Maybe we'll bring them back.
I need more content to harass Michael on the internet with. So
I was just at the world's largest candy store, and oh my god, that place is fantastic.
We'll have to. You know what we have to do? We have to meet up at the state fair and do like food reviews of state fair.
Becky, you're going to go to the state fair, right?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, before we go, I want to remind everyone that Becky and I are going to be at the 2024 MinPost Festival on September 28th. This is an exciting full-day event with speakers from Minnesota as well as national voices. Becky and I will be hosting our first live podcast event, and we'd like you to join us. We'll put the link to purchase tickets in the show notes, and on our social channels, you can take advantage of a 30% discount by purchasing before September 3rd. We would love to see you all in person. Becky, as I've noted before, I I think you're going to have more of a fan club than I am. I think particularly in my house, I think there's a number of people lining up ready to meet you in person. So
Can't wait.
It's going to be fantastic. I want to thank you both. Becky, by the way, just fantastic show prep. You just coordinate these things and do these things with such great knowledge. And I just want to say thank you to our listeners and to you, Becky, for doing this. Julius, it was nice to have you here just once. You ruined it at the end. And I hope you enjoyed your with all of our guests, we always want to get a second opportunity. So we hope that this is a fun experience and that you'd be willing to come back and share some more of your terrible food takes. No, just in all seriousness, we hope you'd come back at some point.
I love that you guys gave me the opportunity to come here. You guys are awesome. Michael, we'll find some common ground and we'll work across the aisle. But yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And again, Becky, seriously, thank you again for just doing this. It really means a lot to me, and I really enjoy it. And again, I couldn't imagine doing it with anyone else. And just want to say thanks again for all of the discussions in this space that we've helped create. We want to thank you for listening to The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky. Before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or the platform where you listen. You can also leave a review and visit us across all social media platforms at BB BreakPod. The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky will be back soon. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Bye.